On this Friday night, fighting the flu. Cases of influenza and COVID-19 in Canada are now dropping.
We're at a year from pre-pandemic levels.
But health officials warn of a spike in deadly Strep A infections. Not guilty.
Hey, it feels good to be free.
A retrial clears an Ontario mother of murdering her severely disabled daughter. More mid-air scares.
Oh my God, it's on fire.
2 aircraft emergencies in the U.S., forcing one to land on a highway. Plus, the art of war.
It's much more deeper than art.
The poignant pieces on display at a Canadian High Commission.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. If you or someone in your family is feeling sick right now, you're not alone. But new numbers from the Public Health Agency of Canada suggest we may have turned a corner on this year's cold and flu season. Katherine Ward has the details in our top story tonight.
So we had RSV, we had croup, we had hand, foot, and mouth, and then over Christmas we got COVID.
Keeping 2 young kids healthy has not been easy for Kate Hobson.
Since September, there's always been somebody that's been sick, with the exception, I think, of about 2 weeks.
New data from the Public Health Agency of Canada actually shows infection rates are starting to improve. Nationally, rates of COVID-19 and influenza are declining, and there are lower than expected rates of RSV for this time of year.
From the point of view of influenza and RSV, that we're at a year from pre-pandemic levels. We're not seeing the very high, very early levels of disease that we saw last year.
But Dr. Don Shepard notes he is seeing some regional differences for COVID-19 infections.
Right now in Ontario and Quebec, we have relatively high levels of disease transmission, whereas many of the other provinces are experiencing fairly low levels. But the good news is that all of it that's floating around up there is not translating into huge levels of hospitalizations, huge spikes of hospitalizations.
Emergency room physician Dr. Steve Flindle is feeling some of that relief.
Fortunately, we're not seeing the absolute crush of people coming in every day that we were over the last month or so.
Flindle says he does worry about viral transmission in crowded waiting rooms.
We still have a mandate for masks in our emergency department, and it's still a challenge to get people to wear their masks because you can't isolate everybody with infectious symptoms.
Doctors say it's a good reminder to make sure you've got updated shots for added protection.
Even if you do become ill and have to come in, your chance of being admitted to the ICU or dying from it are infinitesimally smaller than somebody who hasn't been up to date.
Katherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
Despite those encouraging signs, concerns are growing about a spike in Strep A cases. BC health officials say at least 4 children with the disease have died since mid-December. Ontario's public health agency recently reported 48 people have died since October, including 6 young children. The number of annual Strep A infections across Canada recently reached a record high, with more than 4,600 cases in 2023. A Toronto mother accused of murdering her severely disabled daughter has been cleared on all charges. Cindy Alley was previously sentenced to life in prison for the death of her 16-year-old in what the Crown described as a mercy killing. Alley spent more than a decade fighting to clear her name. Catherine McDonald has covered this case from the start and reports on today's ruling and emotional reaction.
For the first time in 13 years, Cindy Ali can breathe a sigh of relief after being found not guilty of murdering her severely disabled daughter, Sonara.
After today, it's going to be our time as a family to start healing and grieving, but not forgetting Sonara, because she's still here with me.
It has been a long road to justice.
It's been really tough. This has been a really rough road for us.
In February 2011, Cindy called 911 and said 2 armed, masked men had burst into the family's townhome looking for a package. When they left, Cindy said she found her daughter, 16-year-old Sonara, who suffered from cerebral palsy, in the living room without vital signs. 2 days later, Sonara died. Months later, Cindy was charged with manslaughter before the charges were eventually upgraded to murder.
What the Crown is alleging is that the death of Sonara Ali was a planned and deliberate act, and we're alleging that the act was perpetrated by Cindy Ali.
In 2016, a jury found Cindy guilty of first-degree murder, and she served 4 years in prison before the Court of Appeal overturned the conviction, and she was released on bail. The Court of Appeal also ordered a new trial. And Friday, she was found not guilty on all charges.
I've learned that police can rush to judgment, as they did in this case, and that people get charged with crimes they didn't commit.
At the second trial, the Crown argued Cindy killed Sonara to end her pain. The judge rejected that theory.
It was a brand new theory. It didn't please me at all to suddenly allege a mercy killing.
Family and supporters say the verdict means justice has finally been served.
Hey, it feels good to be free.
Cindy's lawyer, James Lockyer, who founded an organization called Innocence Canada to defend the wrongly convicted, says he and his client have yet to discuss whether she will be seeking compensation. Jeff.
Katherine McDonald in Toronto. Thanks, Katherine. The French president's plans to boost his country's birth rate are sparking outrage. Critics call it a push for control over women's bodies. But the problem of an aging population is not unique to France. Nations around the world face similar challenges. And Touria Izri reports on the concerns and consequences of Canada's plummeting birth rate.
France seemed to be an outlier in Europe. It had some of the highest birth rates in the EU. Now they've hit their lowest point since the end of the Second World War. French President Emmanuel Macron is pledging to overhaul parental leave to encourage people to have more children. Macron says France will only be, quote, stronger if it revives birth rates. Last year, that number hit 1.68. In Canada, it's even lower, 1.44. The fertility rate would need to hit 2.1 to achieve what's known as replacement level, but it's been steadily declining.
The total fertility rate has fallen to an all-time low in Canada.
The only thing keeping Canada's population from shrinking is immigration, which has reached record highs.
Immigration certainly helps if you're talking about an aging population. But if our birth rate continues this downward trajectory, our population will be aging at an accelerated pace.
Canadians who have children are finding it increasingly expensive to raise them. This new mom from Toronto goes back to work Monday after a year on maternity leave.
I would say it was only enough because my spouse also works. So if we didn't have his income in addition, it would be very tough, especially with, inflation going up. Get the donkey.
This Nova Scotia woman doesn't know when she can go back to work.
If there's one thing that is adding majorly to parents' stress and exhaustion and mental load right now, it is the childcare crisis.
The Liberals rolled out $10 a day childcare, but there still aren't enough spaces. Adrienne Buckland put her son on a wait list before he was born. A year later, they're still waiting.
The housing crisis may also be deterring Canadians from having children. Experts on demographics say many people want to wait until they own a home before starting a family. But if that's out of reach, having children may feel like one more luxury they can't afford. Touria Izri, Global News, Ottawa.
After consumer backlash, Canada's largest grocer has reversed its plan to end 50% discounts on nearly expired foods. In an emailed statement to Global News, Loblaw confirms that customers can expect to see those 50% off stickers returning in the next few weeks. The company said earlier this week that it would be moving towards 30% discounts to align with what its competitors were offering. Well, after a chilly start to 2024, Canadians are turning up the heat, and we're now learning how many homeowners are taking advantage of Ottawa's oil-to-heat pump program. It's no surprise the provinces most dependent on heating oil account for most of those applying for the federal grant. But as Heidi Petracek reports, some advocates say Ottawa needs to provide better options for Canadians looking to cash in.
Technicians like Alex Lavoie are busy with heat pumps these days.
We've been flat out. Probably one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with customer demand.
Many on the East Coast rely on furnace oil for home heating, and many are also taking up Ottawa's offer of up to $10,000 upfront to switch to heat pumps. That number upped to $15,000 last fall for provinces partnering with the federal government.
The point is really to make a meaningful reduction in people's energy costs, which means we need to spend enough in each home so people can get completely off of oil.
Out of the more than 12,500 applications received so far, more than 11,000 alone are from Atlantic Canada. and about 6,700 are from Prince Edward Island. Almost 850 applications are from Ontario and Quebec, the fewest from the prairies, with a mere 11 combined. BC has 327.
The heat pump grants are available to people living in all provinces, but only those in Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia are getting the grant increase because those provinces are the only ones with partnerships to deliver it.
I live in a frozen house because I can barely pay for the gas.
While this Edmontonian may be on board, most prairie residents where natural gas is the norm have turned a cold shoulder to the idea of switching to heat pumps.
You still have a very challenging environment because you have to overcome the cheap gas and our relatively expensive electricity prices.
And while it's still early days in the 4-year program, it seems Ottawa's budget will be blown. Recently set at $750 million, Canada's parliamentary budget officer estimates it could actually cost $797 million.
It really needs to be available for everyone, regardless of the heating source they use.
But whether Canadians switch or not, there is no choice to face the cost of staying warm. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Construction on a new electric vehicle battery plant in Quebec shut down today, at least temporarily. The multi-billion-dollar project was announced last fall, touting plans to produce some of the greenest batteries in the world. But environmental groups are fighting the project. The site is located about 25 kilometers east of Montreal. And as Mike Armstrong explains, the work, which had barely begun, is now on hold.
This site is now at a standstill. Crews had been cutting down trees. They're now waiting to see when or if they'll start up again. Instead, it's lawyers at the Montreal courthouse who've been busy.
Right now, the work is suspended, so we're relieved about that.
Mark Bichai represents an environmental group fighting the Northvolt project. It says it would mean destroying wetlands on the site. And while the Northvolt project has been approved by the province, it says another project for the same site was denied over environmental concerns.
So far, from the few documents that we do have, it does seem like a double standard.
The Northvolt project was announced with great fanfare last fall. $7 billion investments tend to attract politicians from every level.
Welcome to Northvolt 1 in Skellefteå, Sweden.
Northvolt is a Swedish company that produces lithium-ion batteries. The Quebec plant is slated to open in 2026 and create about 3,000 jobs. To lure Northvolt, the province and the federal government put up $2.7 billion for the construction. Now, the land actually housed a factory in the past. CIL produced paint for decades and even explosives during the Second World War. But critics say the site is now home to endangered turtles and that rules were changed to allow the project. It was greenlit without provincial environmental hearings.
We just want the mechanisms that are basically in our laws and the way that we should work be respected by the government.
Il y a beaucoup de questions en suspens.
Now, Friday's hearing was for opponents to request a court injunction halting work on the site. The company asked to delay the proceedings until Tuesday, but stopped anyway. In a statement to Global News, Northvolt says it suspended work out of respect for the judicial process. The two sides will be back in court next week. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A Ukrainian drone attack sparked a large fire at an oil depot in Russia. Around 6,000 cubic meters of oil were set ablaze during the strike on a city near the Russian-Ukrainian border. No one was injured. Just yesterday, there was a similar drone strike at another oil facility in St. Petersburg. When a roadway becomes a runway. Coming up, the startling scene near America's capital. Plus, major layoffs at Sports Illustrated.
Oh my God, it's on fire!
A frightening sight in the sky over Florida last night as flames were seen shooting out of a plane shortly after it took off from Miami's International Airport. The Boeing 747 cargo plane made an emergency landing. No injuries were reported. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration and Atlas Air, the company that owns the aircraft, now say that a full investigation is underway. And near Washington, D.C., another miraculous landing. This Cessna was forced to land on a snowy Virginia highway shortly after takeoff today. The plane visibly damaged after colliding with highway guardrails during the emergency landing. Incredibly, all 7 people on board reportedly walked away without injury. The cause of that crash is also being investigated. The publisher of Sports Illustrated says it's planning to lay off a significant portion, if not all, of the outlet's union-represented staff. The publisher says the owner, Authentic Brands Group, revoked its marketing license after it failed to make a quarterly payment of nearly $4 million. It's been a difficult few months for Sports Illustrated. It was recently accused of trying to pass off AI-generated content as though it had been produced by humans. Sticking the landing. Still ahead, Japan's precision mission on the lunar surface. The first U.S. spacecraft to attempt a moon landing in 5 decades soared hundreds of thousands of kilometers through space before meeting a fiery end. That's Astrobotics' Peregrine lunar lander firing its thrusters on its way to re-entry before burning up in Earth's atmosphere over the South Pacific Ocean. The privately built spacecraft, developed under a contract with NASA, was designed to settle on the moon shortly after launching into orbit on January the 8th, but the lander suffered a fuel leak, forcing its operators to scrap the entire mission. Japan had better luck, becoming the 5th country to land a spacecraft on the moon. The unmanned SLIM lander is believed to have made one of the most precise moon landings ever. As Jackson Prosco reports, Japan believes the technology will be a powerful tool in future interplanetary exploration.
After a landing sequence dubbed 20 Minutes of Terror, Japan's space agency announced mission accomplished.
We believe that the soft landing itself was successful.
Which have been activated.
Only a handful of countries have ever managed to land on the moon. Japan is now one of them. And this was no ordinary touchdown. The smart lander for investigating moon, or SLIM, had been nicknamed the Moon Sniper because it's designed to land on target with more precision than any other robotic spacecraft. Remember, there's no GPS on the moon. After a journey of more than 1.3 million kilometers, SLIM's target landing zone was only 100 meters wide, about the length of a football field. The private American Peregrine lander, which abandoned its mission after a fuel leak, had planned to land anywhere within a range of several kilometers.
You can see the stars and stripes.
The first manned moon mission, Apollo 11, missed its target by over 6 kilometers.
If you can reliably land exactly where you want, you can then better fine-tune and specialize payloads and missions to take advantage of what are believed to be the unique properties of wherever it is you want to go.
It's a big step for future space missions that might look to tap into precious resources on the moon or elsewhere. And Japan has successfully landed probes on tiny asteroids twice, with the same goal in mind. Back on the moon, there is a problem with SLIM solar panels. They aren't generating power. Backup batteries are working for now, and the mission managed to successfully deploy 2 small rovers, one that hops and one that rolls. The goal is to send back pictures of the probe to verify if it stuck its incredible landing, despite the slim odds. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
From armor to art. Up next, how Ukraine's remnants of war are being transformed for a good cause. As we approach the 2-year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, protective gear worn by Ukrainian soldiers is getting a second life. Riddled with bullets and shrapnel, artists have transformed the body armor into art to tell the story of the war. Crystal Gomansing takes us inside the display at the Canadian High Commission in London.
Bathed in light, adorned with color, every piece linked to the life of a Ukrainian soldier, a life saved by an armored plate.
When you're looking at this, it's so much more than art.
Absolutely. This is, it transcends art. It's much more deeper than art. But to feel that emotional connection, you probably have to have the experience of feeling the war firsthand.
Battling against a full-scale Russian invasion for nearly 2 years has left its mark on every aspect of life in Ukraine. Families torn apart, homes destroyed, lives and bodies forever changed.
All what we do is a contribution of the defense of Ukraine.
Yevgeny Sevchuk says his favorite pieces are from Ukrainian children. Their work, like the rest, reflects their culture, their personalities, and the realities of war. Art Armor was launched in 2022, originally with works by famous local artists as a fundraiser for the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
The terrifying marks of those bullets and shrapnel, as you can see very visibly on all of these plates, tell the story of the ongoing war in Ukraine better than any words possibly could.
Some of the pieces will eventually be auctioned off, with proceeds going towards more protective gear, rehabilitation efforts, and demining projects. Canada House in London is the last stop of the exhibition's European tour, but it's not the end. Organizers are looking for artists anywhere in the world with an eye for creating beauty from brutality. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this icy shoreline on Lake Ontario. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.